Hey everyone, this is Tony, Taint the Lord A7, and I'm here with a collection update. Yep, just a collection update. Most of it is not really metal, with just a little bit of metal thrown in, but yeah, overall it's just mainly non-metal collection update. And well, a great way to start with 2024 with a non-metal collection update, right? So, yeah, let's just go straight to it and hopefully everyone enjoys it. Let's begin. The first album I'm going to show off is Tool's 10,000 Days. This album doesn't really need any introduction. Anyone who's a fan of Tool knows that this is a really solid, excellent progressive rock slash metal album at times, and one of the better albums in the discography. Well, short discography at least. But I think this album is it won't beat out albums like Undertow or Latualis or even the latest one, Fear Inoculum. But for me, this is a really solid album. 10,000 Days is just another solid album in the discography, and I'm just really glad to pick this album up finally. So, yeah, Tour's 10,000 Days, a very excellent progressive rock borderline metal album, and it's just a solid album overall. So I'm really glad to pick this album up. So yeah, Tours 10,000 Days. Next up is from a group, well, from a band I've always known about. I've always heard about them, but never really delved into the music until recently when this album dropped and people were raving about it. And that's Crosses. Good night, God bless, I love you, delete. Now, on this album, Crosses plays like a mixture of goth rock, synth pop, um, electronic music, maybe some dance music thrown in, and yeah, it's just a really atmospheric synth pop, goth rock, electronic group that we that we just brings out the whole sexy atmosphere, you know? It's really hard for me to describe the music because this is the first album I've ever heard from them. But through my experience, it just has this very sexy, atmospheric tone to it. And in some of these songs, I can totally hear being played at like an '80s goth club. And it's a very interesting listen, and I surprisingly really enjoy this one. So yeah, I'm really glad to finally check out Cross's music. And good night, God bless, I love you. Delay is just a solid blend of synth pop, electronic music, goth rock, goth pop, and 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 yeah, just a really interesting group to check out if you're into those kind of genres. But yeah, really glad to pick up Cross's Good Night, God bless, I love you, delete. Just a solid album overall. So really glad to pick this up. Hopefully my description of Cross's music on that album made some sense. So let's move on. Next album I picked up is Queens of the Stone Age in the album In Times New Roman. Now I'm a big fan of the other albums like Songs for the Deaf and Lullabies to Paralyze, but outside of those two albums I haven't really kept that much with the band. Like I've heard Villains, and I thought that was a decent album, but afterwards I just kind of lost track of them. But when they released the new album In Times New Woman last year, I decided to check it out, and it's just a very solid rock album that have a very 70s, 80s vibe to it. Maybe it's just me, but it has like a 70s, 80s vibe rock sound to it, and I surprisingly enjoy it. It has some great riffs, some awesome songs, and yeah, just an overall enjoyable album. And definitely reminds me of like the 70s, 80s sound. Rock sound. Excuse me. Definitely reminds me of the 70s, 80s rock sound. And it's just a really solid album overall. So yeah, I'm really glad to pick up Queens of the Stone Age in Times New Roman. You know, just really solid, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad to pick it up. So there's that. Queens of the Stone Age in Times New Roman. Next up is Devil Driver with Dealing with Demons Volume 2. Um, to tell you, I wasn't that big on this band, and I thought they were okay, decent, but it wasn't it wasn't until I got a VCLT from Anthony over at Metaminos that I really started to pay attention to this band. And on this album, they have this like groove metal, death metal sound that's very prominent. Like they're the kind of group that doesn't really change the sound that much. And if you're into like groove metal, death metal, I think Devil Drivers Dealing with Demons Volume 2 is just a solid album and a continuation of that sound. So, yeah, it's a really good album. And if you know Devil Driver, you know what they sound like. And on this album, it's just heavy and groovy and just solid. So, yeah, Devil Drivers Dealing with Demons Volume 2 is a great album by Devil Driver. And if you're into like groove metal, death metal, and sheer heaviness, this is a great album. So, yeah. So, yeah, that's it. That's Devil Drivers Dealing with Demons Volume 2. Here's the CD and the booklet. So, yeah, great album, and nice to pick up more Devil Driver albums. And this album is a great one. Okay, the next two albums is from the same band. The first one is the latest one, Stain, in the album Confessions of the Fallen. Now, Stain are one of those alternative rock new metal bands from the early 2000s that I've always known about. I've always heard about them, but outside of like one or two songs, I just never really cared for them until recently, because maybe my music taste has matured a bit, but I've grown to appreciate this group a lot more now than I did back then, and decided to pick up Confessions of the Fallen by Stain, the latest album, and it's a continuation of the alternative rock new metal sound, but it's actually pretty damn heavy, and dare I say it's a pretty badass album. I'm not gonna lie. I actually really enjoy this one. You know, this is actually pretty heavy for alternative rock new metal album, and it's just an overall great album, and apparently a good comeback album from the last album that came out back in 2011, which honestly I never heard of. But if this is a comeback album, well, this is a damn good one. So yeah, Stain's Confessions of the Fallen is just a solid alternative rock new metal album that just brings me back to the early 2000s when I was just getting into heavier music at the time. So really glad to pick this album up. Here's the CD and the credits. So yeah, Stain's Confessions of the Fallen is just a really solid album, and really, really, really takes me back to the early 2000s when I was getting to heavier music, like I said. So really glad to pick this album up. Really glad to pick this album up. That's what I'm trying to say. And speak about Stain, I picked up Break the Cycle by Stain. Now this is the album I remember most from this band, mostly because of the songs Fade, It's Been a While, and For You, the three singles off this album, which are actually really great songs when you just really take the time to listen to them and appreciate them for what they are. But overall, this is just a great alternative rock new metal album. You know, it definitely has a very melancholic feel to it that makes this a little bit different than most new metal bands, in my personal opinion. But yeah, Stains Break the Cycle is just a very nostalgic album for me and takes me back to my teenage years when I was like a fan of that genre at the time. And I still am actually. But yeah, Stains Break the Cycle is just a really solid album. And I'm really glad to pick this album up. Here's the CD and the booklet. So yeah, Stains Break the Cycle, a great new metal alternative rock album, and definitely one of the band's best, in my personal opinion. And the last album I'm going to show is an actual metal album. Will you believe that? An actual metal album. And that's God Dethrones, Bloody Blasphemy. This is just a really solid death metal album. Very angry, fast, heavy, riff driven, has some awesome gnarly vocals in it. And I don't understand why God Dethroned doesn't get talked about that much in the metal community. You know? I feel like this band is severely underrated and should be appreciated more. But I digress. But yeah, if you never heard of God Dethroned, I definitely urge you check out God Dethroned's Bloody Blasphemy. It's just a solid death metal album from the late 90s, and definitely a band that should be praised and talked about more. Just a solid death metal album overall. Here's a CD and the booklet. So yeah, God Dethroned, Bloody Blasphemy, a very solid death metal album. Like I said, some awesome riffs, great drummings, awesome vocals, just a great album overall. And yeah, definitely check this album out. Definitely check this album out if you haven't. And that's it, everyone. That's my collection update. Hopefully, everyone enjoyed it, and let me know what you think. So, take care and have a good year. Goodbye.